So, here we are, two therapists, two believers, two friends from two different backgrounds and two different upbringings, but one magnificent and holy God. We will spend time trying to connect the dots between mental health, Christianity, culture, and more. Join us for interesting discussions and even possible disagreements. Connect the dots. Two counselors, one God.
Welcome back. We are very excited to be with you.
That's right. Sarah, it's been so long. It's been
So
so
long.
so long.
And
We're recording multiple shows a day, so we literally are just wrapping up our previous show. So that it was a little
yes,
inside joke, folks. But today we are actually going to be talking about what's today's topic? Oh, go ahead.
do you want me to say?
Yeah.
preparing for the holiday blues.
Right,
That is the
beating the
topic.
holiday blues. That's right. That's right. We want to prepare to beat the holiday blues. That's right. That's right. So
Yeah.
let me share my screen. I'm actually going to share it a little bit just so that people can see, if you're a visual person, what we're talking about, preparing for the holiday blues. And in doing that, one of the first things we are going to talk about is what are some of the things that people go through during the holidays. So,
Yes.
Sarah, what are some of the things that people go through during the holidays?
Yeah, I think it's very important to think about the holiday blues because a lot of people are really, really struggling in preparation for and during the holidays. I can't count on my two hands the number of people that I've heard say that they dread the holidays, almost like they wish they didn't exist. They're not looking forward to the holidays. So a lot of people go through family conflict or estrangement or difficulties, or maybe they don't have a family, or maybe they're single. And so it's really, really hard the holidays being single while everybody else is with their families, So there's just a lot that people go through on the holidays based on their relational status or their family status, prior incidents or things that have occurred on holidays. Maybe a loved one passed away on a holiday. There's so many things that can make the holidays really, really difficult. Those are just a few examples. I don't know if you want to add a few more.
Yeah. Also, just psychologically, the fact that it's the winter and the nights are longer and the days are shorter has an actual impact on our brains, on our serotonin levels, on
Yeah.
our vitamin D, which affects our hormone regulation and even our immunity. So there are a number of things that impact us during the quote holiday season. And we're seeing recently, especially since the worldwide pandemic, an increase in loneliness, an
Mm-hmm.
increase in loneliness. So people are more and more lonely and feel more and more lonely and don't necessarily know how to connect. And that's not even including the variables that you mentioned, Sarah. So yeah,
Yep.
the holidays hold a lot. The holidays hold a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something when I think of loneliness that's important to point out is that you don't have to be alone to be lonely. So
Mm,
somebody can be alone and be lonely, but you could be surrounded by a lot of people and for various reasons feel very, very lonely. In fact, sometimes being around a lot of people and feeling lonely feels can feel worse than being alone and feeling lonely, because it's like, well, I'm around a lot of people, so I shouldn't feel this way, but
right.
we can and we do.
I've counseled a few people in marriages who are just like desiring singleness. And I think that a lot of times we don't think about that one of the
Mm-hmm.
worst ways to feel loneliness is when you're surrounded by people. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that comes with an unknowing and a misunderstanding of how you believe people perceive you. Either they don't understand you, they don't know you. And sometimes they don't care to know you. So it could be a number of things going on. And the reason for them misunderstanding you, not knowing you, not even desiring to know you, could be with could have something to do with variables and aspects of their lives that they're going through. You know, not everyone
Yeah.
is always a jerk. Sometimes people
Right.
do things because they're wounded. I saw a movie recently, and this woman was just like, she was talking to her husband, and her husband was dying of cancer, and he was just like, "I'm so sorry that I didn't make you feel loved." And she said to him, "I know you love me. We're just broken, and broken people don't really know how to love people well, even though they love people." And I was like, wow. Wow. And the holidays, you tend to feel that, not just because it's cold and you want literally people closer to you in proximity,
Yeah.
but again, the other variables that we talked about. I think a few other things that were on this list, I'm just going to share it again really quick, that I think are important. I know you spoke about loneliness and grief. Um, and grief, grief deserves its own.
Yeah.
During this time, people grieve not just people that they lost, but they grieve things that they've lost, i.e. time. That's part of the
Mm-hmm.
reason why New Year's resolutions exist. People start thinking,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I lost this whole year. I know for me, around October, I start doing inventory to see what else can I hurry up and do that I was supposed to do this year that I didn't do this year, you know? So there's that. Also,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna add to that another aspect of grief is that for people who struggle with depression, for instance,
Mm,
or other mental health issues, there can be a grief that maybe you do love your family and there's not a lot of issues in your family and you love being with your family, but you're so depressed that you feel like you're not even enjoying it,
mhm.
right? So that's a whole other layer or area of grief that people
Right,
can be struggling with over the
right.
holidays.
And again, a grief deserves its own simply because there's another aspect of grief is anticipatory grief, where you anticipate the things that are going to happen in order to prepare you for
Mm-hmm.
what you know is going to happen. You know, life cycles change. Sometimes if you're in college, you could be leaving, you could be going to certain places, or you could not be going places while your friends or family are going places, you know? Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
holidays have a lot, especially for older people. For older people, especially, they bring on a lot. So it's important to be kind to others. Um, Conflict. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of conflict often around surrounding major events, which holidays would be considered major events. Like even when people think of weddings or, you know, family reunions or whatever it is, but holidays are big events, and conflict tends to come up around big events for various reasons in families, in relationships, etc. So conflict just is in the pot boiling often over holidays. And I think something else I was thinking about that too is that we have in the United States two major holidays that come like one right after the other. We have Thanksgiving and then we have Christmas, right? For those of us who are Christians anyway, who are celebrating Christmas. So that's two big holidays in a row, two family things in a row, with a lot of room for conflict. And like you said earlier, if somebody also struggles with something like seasonal affective disorder and they're already feeling low or down, that just makes it all much worse. So,
Do you want to talk a little bit about seasonal affective disorder?
sure. I mean,
You kind of
jump
like
to
summed it up, but I want you to say it speak to it a little bit more.
Yeah, so there are certain people who, based on the seasons, the light changes, et cetera, they're not. I don't. They haven't like narrowed it down to like a very very specific one thing, but essentially, there's people who starting in the fall and leading into the winter and through the winter months, struggle with what's called seasonal affective disorder. The reason why it's called seasonal affective disorder is because it's seasonal. It's based on seasons. And affective relates to your emotions. So your mental health, essentially, specifically your emotional state is affected, which typically means you're struggling with depression during those months. So there's some people who go on medication specifically during those months every year to help them because it's a recurrent pattern in their life. There's other people who use special lamps to try to get themselves more light, since there's less light in certain locations of the world. Maybe they need to make sure they have enough vitamin D and all of the other vitamins, etc. Right. But it's just a reality that it's a struggle around that time of year.
Right. And how the seasons and the weather impacts us similarly, even in the spring. We see spring fever. You see individuals, their moods change, they get happier. And you see this even when people don't even have seasonal affective disorder. You know, yep. If you live in the North, people start wearing really, really short shorts, even at the first sight of grass when the snow is thawing out. You see all of these big cars come out of nowhere. It's like, where were these cars all winter? So definitely the weather, the seasons, the days affect us. You know, we are created. I want to say this right because I don't want people to mistake what I'm about to say, but we are created to cooperate with nature. Please don't hear what I am not saying. I am not she was promoting witchcraft and wizardry and said pantheism is no. I just want you all to know that God created us. Like, think about the garden. One of the things, Adam was a steward over the garden. He said, be fruitful and multiply. And Adam and Eve's job was to tend to the things of that were natural. So I just, wanted to say that. So we have conflict. Mm-hmm. We have financial strain.
Yep. Yeah. Lots of holiday expectations for buying things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and then there can also be the grief of not being able to afford buying things for your children, or shame can come alongside of that. Right. Not being able to afford to get people gifts like you would like, etc.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's important to, which could lead to disappointment and people being disappointed in you and you even being disappointed in yourself. And so these are some of the things that people go through on the holidays. So again, when we think about the things that they go through, a lot of times people can say, okay, well, they're going through something. How can we tell? Like, what are some of the signs and symptoms of the holiday blues?
Yes. And here we have a list. And I will note that pretty much these are symptoms of depression, essentially. So a lot of people are feeling depressed leading up to and during and after the holidays. So this list of all of these different words are symptoms that are used to describe various aspects of what it's like to feel depressed. So we have hopelessness or helplessness. It could be related to something specific, or it could just be a general sense of hopelessness or helplessness based on mood. We have difficulty making decisions. The reality is that when we're feeling low, we just can't think as clearly, or maybe our mind is slowed, or because we struggle with hopelessness and helplessness, we're then struggling to make decisions and we're second guessing ourselves because we're not really in our best frame of mind, essentially. So decision making can be difficult. What else would you want to comment on, Leigh? Any of the symptoms?
In addition to decision making and anxiety and worry, there is the chance, the higher probability of people who struggle with depression having suicidal ideation during this time of year. So
Yeah.
what you want to watch out for is isolation or withdrawal. Something that's not on the list is anger.
Mm,
I think that a lot of times, depending on depression and or anxiety, it can appear or present itself as being angry or irritable. I do
right.
know that we had irritability on the list, but anger is something you can watch out for because people tend to use anger at times to protect their pain. It
Hmm.
helps them, and not that they want their pain guarded, they use it to protect more so their vulnerability because they are in pain. So
Hmm.
anger, I once heard a psychologist say that anger is fear and sadness's bodyguard.
Hmm.
And yeah, not to mention all of the things that come up around holiday season could cause someone to feel angry because they feel like the world is unjust to them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if you could share a little bit more, Lee, about like when it comes to suicidal ideation and somebody wanting to commit suicide, what specifically about the holidays makes it different that the suicide rates or the suicidal ideation can tend to go up for people during that time?
Well, and I think, well, one, we were talking about it. I don't know if there's anything specific that comes to your mind, but I wanted to say this. Just um, in addition to us talking about the loneliness,
Hmm.
um, that we had spoke about, before. There's also it's a time where people make plans, and again, this is connecting to loneliness and lack of community, and sometimes even resources, and the fear or anticipation of beginning a new year or continuing even more
Hmm.
in loneliness. So again, it's hopelessness
Yeah.
and is at the core of all suicidal ideation. And the number one diagnosis connected to hopelessness is depression. And
Hmm.
I just want to say this real quick. I know you said commit. We try not to use certain words like commit suicide, and not because, yeah, we just try not to use certain words. It makes the survivors of those who attempted suicide feel even more condemned. And
Mm.
we also don't want to use words like complete, because
Mm.
it makes the family members of those who died by suicide
Hmm.
feel somehow dismissed and even offended and disrespected. So we
Mm.
just want to
Hmm.
use, certain terms like attempted suicide, tried to take their own life, killed themselves, And
Hmm.
young people are saying stuff now like self-delete. It's wild because that started as a social media trend to try
Mm.
not to get dings or copyright strikes on social media, but it actually
Mm.
makes sense.
Mm.
But what were you going
Yeah.
to say as far as what could be at the root of suicidal ideation around the holidays in particular?
Well, I was actually specifically asking you since
Oh, okay.
have been a part of the suicide
Oh,
hotline
yeah, yeah,
and you do education surrounding suicide and all that kind
yeah.
of stuff. So I just thought it would be great to hear it.
Okay, I thought you had one thing
Mhm.
in mind in particular, but no, it is those things. It is the lack. I spoke before about loneliness. It is
Mhm.
huge. We are not okay, and in particularly, guys are not okay.
Mhm.
Um, the only time we use the word like complete when it comes to suicide now, and this is jargon changes, folks. So, is when we're talking about like statistics. So, statistically speaking, women attempt suicide more than men, but men complete suicide more than women.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is men use more lethal means than women. It's not because women are just doing it for attention or what. It's not it. In fact, because of some of the survivors of suicide, the women said the reason why they use less lethal means is because they were considering the people who would find them, and
Mm.
they didn't want to be in pain or
Mm.
impelled should
Mhm.
they survive. So in their minds, I don't want my family to find this, gruesome scene. So I'm going to take a bunch of pills.
Right.
They didn't want to further traumatize them. Whereas guys were in such agony and pain, their focus was on stopping the pain. So I'm not going to say guys are more selfish and girls are more selfless either. I'm not going
right.
there.
No. Yeah.
All right.
Well, and I guess another question I have for you, Leigh, is if somebody is with us right now watching this and they tend to struggle with suicidal ideation over the holidays, what would you want to say to them?
First thing I want to say is you're not alone. You are not alone in your struggle. That is the voice of the enemy and the lies of this world. And I also want to say your pain is valid. So that even if right now you are physically by yourself, you are not alone. There are people who are willing to help. If you are in the States and you are watching this, you can call 988, which is the national crisis line. 988, which is the national crisis line. You can text help or even talk to 741-741 in order to text somebody. There are individuals who are willing to help. And I also wanted to say 80% of the calls that we got during holiday season at the height of the pandemic, 80% of them did not need any type of medical or emergency intervention. A lot of times people are just lonely and don't feel understood. So you are not alone. And we saw a huge increase during COVID and especially during the holiday season. So you're not alone. Help is possible. Recovery is possible, and you are worth it. That is a lie from the pit of hell. Yeah, I just want people to know they are not alone. A lot that's one of the main lies. You're alone. You'll never get the help. It's always going to be the same thing. How you feel today is not how you will always feel. Notice I'm not lying. I'm not saying just push. You have weak faith. I'm not going to the opposite in this utopic. Everything's gonna be a-okay. No, I'm not going there either. Multiple things can be true. It's going to be tough, but you are worth it, and help and recovery are possible. So yeah,
Yes,
thank you for asking me that.
Thank you for asking me that. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. And I think really whether somebody has suicidal ideation or not is struggling with that at any time. But since we're talking about the holidays specifically right now, part of the reason why is because of the low, depressed mood. You mentioned loneliness. View of self can be impacted, how I view myself, how I view God, how I view the world, just based on the nature of even the amount of serotonin in our brain, for instance, impacts how we think. So the reality is that people are having over the holidays experiences in which they just feel really low, right? And they are thinking really low thoughts, I could say, about themselves, about the world, about others potentially. And it's because they feel really depressed. So, and it's okay to feel depressed over the holidays. You're not a bad person if you feel depressed over the holidays. I think that's really important to say too. And you don't have less faith. Yes, that's very important too. This is not a matter of you not having faith. Jeff Black said something, who was our professor and colleague and friend. He said, you cannot cast out what you need to medicate. You cannot medicate what you need to repent of, and you cannot repent of what you need to cast out. Sometimes you need a pill. Sometimes you need a person.
Sometimes you need a pastor, and sometimes you need all three. I think it's important as Christians, we tend to think in these false dichotomies, like either I have this faith or I'm the worst. And no, if you have chemicals in your brain that are lacking or depleted that should be at certain levels, you can do all the things you can try to have all the happy thoughts. It's not that's not going to be the thing that makes you feel better. Notice I said feel better. It could be part of what helps you to remain healthy despite how you feel. And therein lies the difference. When we talk about on Refocus Now and as therapists, we use how we feel to point at what could be going on beneath the surface. Because feelings, as another professor, shout out to Lisa Kuzma, because feelings and emotions are excellent indicators, but horrible dictators. So although we feel the blues in this particular season, we do not have to succumb to the blues. We can beat these blues. So, yeah.
Yes, we can, which doesn't mean also that we won't feel down beating the blues.
Right.
But should we go to our next slide then to talk about how you can support yourself or others during the holidays? How you can support yourself or your neighbor or a family member for the holidays, because the reality is that we need community. We need community. We were created in the context of community, and we were created to live in the context of community. Scripture makes that very clear. And so you are potentially somebody's community, and they need you in specific ways, and you can help them in certain ways, or you have people around you that can be community for you if you're struggling with the holiday blues. So would you like to share some of, should we pause for the barking?
No.
Okay. No. Would you like to share some of the ways that people can support themselves or others during the holidays?
Sure. I think developing a plan, you spoke about self-care, but developing a self-care plan is good. And a self-care plan, we actually already have one. Like if I ask you, what do you do when you're stressed? Whether you realize it or not, that's your self-care plan. That's what you're doing. The key is your self-care plan should have different levels to it for different levels of care that you will need. And it also should be something that you practice regularly, not in times of trouble. It should be a spectrum of care for yourself. Now, I know we said self a lot for Christians in the West who may feel like, oh my gosh, everything is about yourself. No, we are talking about stewardship of who it is you are. And I'll never forget my Christian professor, shout out to Dr. Penny Freeman, said, make sure you take care of the main tool that God will use in your ministry, in your life, and that is yourself. So your self-care plan should be something that you do regularly. It should be something that you do that could be long-term. It should be something that you do that is restorative, and it should have different levels to it. You also don't want to make it self-centered. So, yeah.
Yeah, that made me think of an acronym that they taught us, which was HALT, which stands for hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Because they talked to us as therapists as we were learning about becoming therapists, about the importance of taking care of ourselves so that we can truly be there for our clients and be in our right mind in a way that's going to be beneficial. And so HALT is a good acronym to think of in general for life of, am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? And am I tired? And what do I need to be able to help myself so that I can be in a better frame of mind and be taking care of myself? So even if we think of, to throw in a psychology term, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Food, water, shelter, like the basic needs. that's a part of the self-care plan, making sure that we are doing those things. Often when we feel depressed, we start neglecting things. We stop drinking water, like you're just drinking water right now. We don't drink enough water, and water is so, so important. So as an athlete, and from studying and teaching on sports psychology, if you're even lacking a small percentage of the amount of water you need in your body, it can decrease your athletic performance astronomically. So that means that us not having enough water also can decrease our ability to function in life. So food, water, shelter is a starting point, making sure that we're caring for ourselves at first, just at the basic level of needs. Are we eating? Are we drinking? Are we sleeping, etc.?
Yep. I love how, I'm just going to say a few of these. We spoke about your self-care plan should include some type of mindfulness. And for those who are like, well, what, download the app, use the app. And also just remember that mindfulness, a short way to remember it is deliberately thinking about what you're thinking about, which can help us replace rumination with proper processing. What did you say? What kind of processing did you say?
Intentional thinking intentionally
right.
About truth is what I said.
Exactly. And yes. Praying and lamenting, which means allowing God's word to convict. Notice I did not say condemn. Do not conflate conviction with condemnation. The enemy wants us to, so that we can avoid being convicted and stay stuck ruminating and over negative things, which means we should have a healthy social network. And if we don't, there are networks out there to take healthy risks. I would say start somewhere where there is minimal risk, like in a Facebook group, or find a healthy YouTube page, where you can begin to connect with people. There are Facebook, I know some of you may be like Facebook, and also Instagram and other social media communities. Now, really quick, I know we have about a couple minutes left. When it comes to your neighbors, ask your neighbors how they're doing and be deliberate. Make time for them. Don't make promises you can't keep. Be kind to act and follow up on the things that you've heard. Listen, don't try to fix, and encourage. Encourage. Use your words to encourage. Sarah, is there anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in terms of groups, if you're struggling to find friendships or friend groups, you can also join therapy groups. There are therapy groups. There are grief groups. There's lots of different groups that are specifically focused on mental health. So definitely you can look into that if you're not feeling safe enough in non-therapeutic settings. Therapeutic settings can help people feel more safe to connect because there's somebody directing that process. So
yeah. Thank you, folks. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. For more information, click the link in the bio, and even click the link so that you can find out about our blog, our website, and to get on our mailing list. Grace and peace.